Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Imperfects Season 1, Episodes 5 and 6. So, I really gotta say, Episode 6 really comes off similar to X-Men 2, X-Men United, the X-Men 2 movie. And, it kind of copies and pastes that whole scene where Wolverine is to come to find out that Stryker is to be back in his life. So Wolverine is kind of like clawing through people and attacking them in this Xavier school mansion. And we have Iceman who's taking Rogue through these hidden passages to try to scramble them out of the Xavier school before any of them get tranquilizer darted in the neck and fall over. So we have that kind of going on mostly in episode 6. And so in episode 5, if we don't have a kind of a love is in the air kind of thing for these characters, because it seems oddly enough, we have Tilda and we have Juan, that even though bizarrely they both have a relationship for either one of them, it seems that bizarrely these characters keep hinting on the fact that they're going to possibly be an item, be together, both Juan and Tilda. Even though it doesn't make sense, they just keep going to build on that fact. But then also, love is in the air for a person who can easily get it, called Abby. Abby, of course, is to be seemingly getting romantically connected with Hannah, as it seems that Hannah is to go on and be more in this show, but somehow connected to the Imperfects. So, come to find out, we finally realize what the heck was Burke transforming into, transmutating, hybriding, switching into another thing, into another person. We find out what the heck was that with Burke, what was going on there. And I was kind of disappointed. I wanted the weird, goofy-looking thing that I saw episodes before, but instead, I end up getting this? Okay. So, kind of a Debbie Downer. But, on the upside of things, we finally get to Dr. Sarkoff, and we finally reel him in these episodes. I'm like, thank goodness. Now we have goal achieved, achievement unlocked. It's done. Finally. I'm like, yay. So now we can just go on and just call this show a wrap, right? Because the one thing they needed to do finally is done. They have nothing else going on as far as story. They're just going to limp on for a number of episodes till they call it a day. But it also seems that there's a possibility that these characters are going to be cured. Which, do you really think that, these characters are legitimately going to get cured? I don't think so. No. I think that more than likely what's going to happen is, even if they do get cured, they're going to realize, oh no, we need these powers, and so they're going to have to desperately come back to them. But you know what? I bet also that this is going to also be like the Misfits, where you cure the characters, but then in the second season, all of a sudden, for some odd reason, they're like, no, we need our powers back, and all of a sudden, the powers that the characters end up taking are all different powers. they all get something different than what they had originally. How much you want to bet that's going to be season 2? If not some point in this show, but that's my gut feeling. Um, I'm hoping Tilda gets super strength, and I'm hoping that Abby gets genius intellect, and then Juan is still a chupacabra. Sucks to be him. He's still gonna be a werewolf, because somebody's gonna have to go on and still get the same power. Wouldn't that be funny? So with that said, either that or more beneficial powers. Maybe Abby moves things with her mind. I don't know. Like this is starting to sound more and more like Beetleborgs. If you guys have ever heard that, but big bad Beetleborgs. What a show. Anyways, so let's just go on into Double Five time territory. I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this one. Because I think most of what happens in this episode, I kind of teed up a little bit, but I'm going to go into spoilers and be more specific about what plays out within these episodes. So, let me know in the comments below how you felt about these episodes, whether you liked them, whether you hated them, or you felt indifferent about them, whether you're just like, why isn't this guy going on and hurrying up and watching the rest of this season so I can just be done with these reviews? What the guy? Come on. And, like, really, I gotta say, there's just a lot of new releases that came out recently, but stuff also that I really wanted to see. There is just some stuff where it's like, I have to see this now, I can't avoid it, I need to watch it, and that's what's going on. Regardless of how many things that I have to go back to or I have to cover, like shows and stuff like that when I start doing these massive shows. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I have so many other things that I could be reviewing also. But anyways, let's go on. Let's go into that territory of what is to always be called spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time we're getting to spoil this bit of episodes. So, in the beginning of episode 5, we go on to, grading of these episodes. I honestly did not like these episodes compared to the other two, or the two before that. So, like, we had some momentum swing going, but then I kind of feel like this is kind of backpedaling me, simply because I feel like a lot of these two episodes are to just stretch things out, are to just eat up time. It feels like filler to me. And whereas probably some of the episodes might have just continued to feel that way, but I just started to just figure out a way how to like the show. But this kind of feels like stretching. It's filler. But let's go into it. So, let's go into spoilers. So in the beginning of episode 5, as I don't know what I'm consistently having to do with my hand here, but it's happening regardless. So I just need it to do something. So episode 5, in the beginning of episode 5, we have Juan, we have Tilda, and they of course are in their itchy nip van, and they have Owen's cell, and they, of course, are to text away. And so we have Dr. Sarkoff, who is supposedly making his way to this location, but then it seems that he doesn't make it completely there. And so now both Tilda and Juan are contemplating whether or not that Sarkoff has a gun or not. And so they end up making a bet whether or not that Sarkov has a gun. So if Juan wins, let me pause for a second. So if Juan wins, he gets to go on these go-karts with Tilda. And so if Tilda wins, Tilda is to want to see Juan's sketchbook that Juan won't go on and have her see. So that's the whole reason why she wants to make this bet. So, come to find out, since Sarkov didn't show himself, we then have Tilda and Juan make their way back to speak with Burke and Abby. And so Tilda and Juan are to mention that they were to have a gun be held on them, even though it wasn't really the case. And so Tilda ends up asking Burke if there's a possibility that Sarkov would have a gun on him. And so Burke is like, well, yeah, more than likely he probably should have one. And Tilda's like, well, I think I'm going to have won that bet. But it's like, well, you can never really confirm that. You can never really confirm that by just asking someone else if it's possible. So we then have Tilda and Juan, who are to possibly find out where they're going to need to go next. And supposedly they are to joke about uh, that they're going to make a date out of it. And Tilda ends up walking off, and Juan ends up saying to Abby, it's like, well, hey, like, don't go on and make jokes about the whole dating thing between me and Tilda, because Tilda is very sensitive about all this. And so, oh, Juan also was to tell Tilda to stop making jokes about him being young or younger than her. And Tilda's like, well, hey, like, I'll do that regardless because it's a nice gesture. And so that's when Juan turns around and just wants to go karting. But so because they end up re-bringing it back up later on, and so I thought I would mention it here. So we have one that makes it back to Tilda, and Tilda is to mention to Juan how it's like, oh, so I'm sensitive, huh? And Juan's like, oh, you heard that? And Tilda's like, well, of course I hear everything. Like, she hears everything everywhere. And so Juan is like, man, that power is just so weird. It just feels like you're a psychic or something. And Tilda's like, well, like, I hear everything. So they go on and they make their way to this location, and so they end up getting a little lost. So they go into this kind of like convenience store to ask this old man, as this guy is to uh, tell them, like, hey, like, go on and like go back the way you came, because like there's no point in you going on and finding this guy Sarkov. We also have a mother that is to have a like a missing persons piece of paper that she wants to put into this store. And the guy who runs the store is like, well, yeah, like, go on and just kind of put that over like the dog that ended up getting lost, because that dog has been missing for so long, like he's obviously dead. So come to find out, this girl or this woman is missing a girl named Zoe. And so we have Juan, we have Tilda telling this woman, it's like, well, hopefully you find your girl, so on and so forth. So Tilda and Juan do find out where Dr. Sarkov is, and all of a sudden, both Tilda and Juan are in the middle of something, as Tilda is to use her Banshee power to go on and somehow break Dr. Sarkov's gun that he was holding, his rifle, and his double barrel. And we all of a sudden have Zoe, who is kind of using her power, and then is to have this like blast where she then runs off. And so we now have Juan, Tilda, and Sarkov, and they're talking about like, hey, what was going on there, so on and so forth. And Sarkov is going on and telling both Tilda and Juan that Sarkov is trying to do the right thing, that he realizes that this girl is to be at risk with her power, and so Sarkov is just going to kill her to save thousands of people from this girl's power, which could kill someone. And so we have Juan and we have Tilda, and they're talking to Sarkov about a possible cure that Burke is to have figured out. And so we have just a bunch of time here where Sarkov is just going into the science of things and is to ask Juan, like, how good was he in biology? And Juan is like, well, I got a C minus. And Sarkov is like, well, that tracks. So while Tilda and Juan and Sarkov are just having a good time by themselves, we are also to have a whole thing going on with Abby making her way to see Hannah. So we, and heaven forbid I remember the conversation between the two of these characters at this moment. So Abby was to go on and talk to Hannah and was to just kind of check up on her to like see how things are going. And so come to find out, Hannah is to go on and mention about Yake, the guy who, of course, was the guy who died in the previous episode. And at some point, Hannah was to mention how Isabel was to have been the person who had killed him. But did I mention about Owen's cell phone? Because I want to say that I didn't mention it, but I'm not quite sure. Because Tilda and Juan had Owen's cell phone to try and talk to Dr. Sarkov and text him. I don't know if I said that or not. But anyways, I just wanted to make that clear. But so Abby is talking to Hannah, and we are kind of having Hannah convincing, or we have Abby that is convincing Hannah to work with them. And Hannah's like, well, are you gonna use your like your sexy power to try to get me to work with you? And Abby's like, you mean my pheromones? No, like, I'm not gonna use that against you to work with me. Like, no, I want you to decide to do that yourself, to do the right thing. And so Hannah's like, oh, okay, all right. So all of a sudden we have Hannah who's getting texts like crazies, like wildfire. It's like, oh my god, yeah, wow. So we have Hannah who's getting all this text from Isabel. And so Isabel is saying like, "Hey, you're not having a change of heart, are you? Like I haven't heard from you in a while, and this and that, um, and I have a mission for you to do." And Hannah's like, "A mission, really?" So, and she also talks about her getting caught before, with the guys. So Hannah then goes on and makes her way to where Abby and Burke are. And so Hannah goes on and confesses everything. And so we have Burke that is want to call the police on Hannah. And Abby is convincing Burke not to just say, like, well, hey, like, you can say on the phone, like, what happened with Isabel, but don't further go on and say that Hannah gave you this information. And so Burke agrees to that. But then also, we have Hannah that calls Isabel's cell phone. Come to find out that the cell phone is somewhere in this building. And so they continue to call the cell phone and come to find out that the cell phone is in some ventilation duct or something. So Hannah gets it out and is like, okay, like this cell phone is in here. Why? Come to find out the reason why that is because Burke is Isabel and Isabel is Burke. It's a Fight Club scenario. It's like like how is it that people confuse you for me because we're one and the same person? Oh my god, wild. So we of course have Burke that changes into Isabel, and so like we figure this out. So but anyways, back with Tilda and Juan and Sarkov. So we have at one point where Tilda, Juan, and Sarkov are to just kind of make their way to try to find Zoe. And come to find out, we have the people in town who are all looking for Sarkov, realizing that Zoe had been transformed by Sarkov into this monster. And so we have this lynch mob that is going after Sarkov to try to get to him. And so by the time that we, of course, have Tilda and Juan and Sarkov finding out about this mob, Tilda and Juan completely disappear because they're like, dude, we're going to get out of here. So Sarkov ends up going with the mob, and then Tilda and Juan end up making their way to, of course, Zoe. All while also Tilda and Juan are talking about heartbeats, that it seems that Tilda can even hear heartbeats, and she can go on and hear Juan's heartbeat and know how like different it sounds. And Juan is like, well, like why is that? Because I'm younger? And Tilda's like, no, it's like your heartbeat is different because you become a chupacabra. And so like you have like a whole different thing about you compared to everyone else. So Juan's like, oh, okay. So they end up finding Zoe in the woods, and it seems that she is trying to like secrete her power. Um, I remember like there was this kind of like Russian Teen Titans character where this guy would go on and try to figure out how to get rid of his power by like trying to consistently try to drain it. Um, and I want to say like this guy's character's name was like Conrad or something, or Comrade. Um, but I remember this character, and like this was a character that was trying to get rid of his power, um, almost kind of like the boys. If people understand like Soldier Boy's power, um, same kind of situation here where like we just have Zoe who's trying to get rid of this power and put it into these power lines, or is just trying to figure out how to get rid of it. So we have Tilda and Juan that really just need Zoe to come with them to go into town so they can basically trade Zoe for Sarkov. And so they're like, hey, come on, Zoe, like, come on, come with us. So, because they need to showcase that Zoe is still alive. So, Tilda and Juan are to make it to this lynch mob, and we of course have the old man who had the convenience store. He is to have this gun up and wanting to take out Sarkov. So Juan and Tilda are to bring in Zoe and say like, "Hey, here, look, she's still alive." And so Zoe is to go on with her family, but it seems that all of a sudden she's starting to showcase that she is to start to get power, and all these lights come on. It's like, well, like where do these lights come on from? And they're like, well, it's possibly the generator, but we then realize that it's actually Zoe who's starting to use her power, and so Juan ends up going on to like grab onto Zoe and fall to the ground, and and Juan ends up turning into a chupacabra and is to kind of hold on to her, and it seems that he nullifies her power, and then Juan ends up changing right back to normal Juan. He doesn't need anybody. So now I guess they kind of figured out like, okay, like this girl has power, like what did Sarkov do to her, so on and so forth. But they end up resolving it to just kind of figure things out. So we have Sarkov, Tilda, and Juan that make their way uh, to make it back to Burke and Abby and so on and so forth. And so, come to find out, we had Sarkov and everybody making their way to this location. And so, come to find out, they end up seeing the switch that Sydney turns into uh, Isabel and back and forth. So they're like, "Oh, okay, all right. Like this is a switching situation, all right." So it seems that Sarkov is to take Burke into the lab to take some samples to try to understand his transformation. And so we have Sarkov who is to give sleeping medication to Burke and to Isabel, excuse me, to change them back and forth so that way he can go on and poke and prod them. And he starts to realize that it seems that every time Sarkov was to stab into uh, Isabel, it seems that we had Burke who did not go on and carry the same injuries as Isabel did, or that the injury is to be somehow a trade-off because when Burke comes back, she then mentions something about her liver and how she's having liver problems. So we we now have to at some point go on into the next episode. So I think we're probably gonna have to go on to into that soon. So let's let's just possibly go into it. So we have Sarkov that is thinking that he can go on and come up with a cure for this. And so now we have Agent Jim Sponson, who is to come in with a number of agents to try and infiltrate uh, Burke's place. And so we have these guys come in and they are to try to shoot bullets and stuff like that. Tilda is to hear them coming and is to also hear them planning on shooting these characters. And we also had a moment where Hannah immediately felt like she wasn't being welcomed, especially by Tilda, and Hannah wanted to leave, but then all of a sudden, with this event happening, Hannah ends up getting stuck here. So now we trying to think of the right words here. We have everyone ducking and covering as the bullets are flying, and so all of a sudden we get to hear, because Tilda is telling us that they're going to send in the big gun, whatever that means. And so Abby is to make her way to see what this big gun is, and come to find out it's Dr. Crane. And so Dr. Crane is to talk to Abby and call Abby a Jeep or GP. And they're like, what is a GP? And Crane ends up saying that it's a gifted person. That's what they are calling them. Come to find out, we'd realize later on that the actual thing of it is guinea pig. So Crane is to negotiate with Abby and really just going nowhere. And so we then just have a fight out between the Imperfects and these agents. And we come to find out that Abby might have like a different pheromone thing than what she had before, where people could love her. Now, like, I think Abby is secreting this pheromone of sorts that is to control people, it seems. Like, because we have a red pheromone, and I'm not quite sure what that is. But so, Abby is to also have tried to talk to Isabel, and is to want to know about certain information, and Isabel is not going to give that to her, because as much as she wants to give this to Abby, like, she would rather not, for her own personal benefit. So, we also had a whole scene where Burke was talking about a guy named Lind, and how she desperately wanted this plaque, and now she finally has it. And she's like, well, I didn't want to get this plaque this way. But then also, Burke is to talk about Yake, and how Yake had shorted Burke for this patent. And so Burke turned around and sued Yake, and she won. And so I guess Yake had only kept the paperwork where he is to have his name on it and not Burke. So I don't know what that all was about, but that was there. And so we go on to have them uh, make this deal, strike this deal, as we have the Imperfects kind of wiping out all these agents, and we have Agent Jim who's talking to Dr. Crane, and is thinking it's like, well, like, you know what, I can get what I want, and you can get what you want, which is just to kind of experiment on these characters, because we try to test certain weaponry on the Imperfects, and it seems that it doesn't work. That one of the weapons is to be tried is this gas on Abby, and it seems that this gas does not work on her, but she just removes this mask off this guy and it works on him. They also end up using this certain, I think, kind of sound weapon on Tilda, and that doesn't work. And I think they also end up using some electrical weapon on Juan, and that doesn't work. So, but now while all this fighting is going on, Hannah ends up getting shot in the chest. And so they end up rushing her to this other room. And so Abby is to try to figure out which possible green juice, as it seems, is to give Hannah the right power, like a healing power. So Abby goes on to give Hannah this green juice, and come to find out, Hannah is to get power from this, and not quite sure exactly what the power is. It looks like it's like a flash power, maybe, where like this girl can kind of speed and do certain attacks really quickly. That's what I'm assessing. So she's like a speedster. So, but anyways, when it all comes down to it, we have where all the other agents are taken out, and Crane is by herself. And so their master plan is like, well, hey, like, we'll bargain and we'll give you Burke / Isabel if you kind of leave us alone right now and kind of let us be, so that way we can have Sarkov, who ends up coming up with the cure and fixing all these characters. So Crane ends up taking Isabel to just be like, okay, well, like, what kind of power do you really have? And so Burke ends up transforming into Isabel. It's like, oh, okay, all right, like, that's an interesting power. So that ends up wrapping up a bulk of what happens for these episodes. I feel that there probably is something possibly left to talk about, but I feel that is roughly about it. So, with that said, I'm just going to go on and just get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you'd like to talk about for this show, or any mistakes that I made, or anything like that. So, feel free, because I am going to, honestly, just get out of here. Plus, also, with the fusing of two shows together, me also being fairly tired because I realize I'm going to need to get out of here. Yeah, like, there ends up getting some certain things lost in translation. So, as far as me having to remember all this information fairly quickly. So, thank you for listening to this. Thank you for being a part of the channel if you otherwise have subscribed recently. But anyways, I'm just going to go on and get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.